Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Chancellor's Forum, the changing landscape of judicial security and beyond. This forum is a follow-up to the Judicial Security Forum that our 2024 Chancellor, Jen Coatsworth, presented last December. So we are grateful for her for beginning the conversation. I'm also grateful that you are all here with us today. We thought the next phase of the conversation should actually focus on personal security measures that legal professionals and lawyers should take to protect themselves, their colleagues, their clients, and even their families. This topic is most relevant now, following so many incidents that we have unfortunately seen professionals go through. For example, the United Healthcare CEO, Brian Thompson's assassination. Judges, lawyers, and all professionals like Thompson often work late or early. They espouse positions that others find objectionable sometimes. They travel to unfamiliar locations, work in multi-tenanted buildings, and are responsible for the care and safety of so many in their orbit. These factors, along with others, place them at risk of harm. In fact, one of our very own chancellors, my mentor and colleague, Gaten Alfano, was attacked by an adverse party in a case he was handling as he exited his building during late work hours. We are grateful for his recovery and strength in bringing forth justice to the situation. His leadership is a great guide for me personally. And thus, we are here continuing the conversation. So let me begin by introducing our speakers to you for this afternoon's program. I am very pleased to introduce Dan Pascal. You have his full bio here, but I do want to highlight that he is a board-certified security and emergency management professional with more than 30 years of experience as a practitioner, consultant, instructor, trainer, keynote speaker, author, and volunteer leader. I have worked with Dan, so I know what he is capable of doing. As CEO of CoSecure, Dan manages a team of security professionals, former federal, state, and local law enforcement leaders, and military and emergency management officials with unparalleled skills in physical security, cybersecurity and compliance, emergency preparedness, and business continuity. I'm also very happy to introduce our other expert today, Carl Morgano. Carl is a corporate security professional with more than 25 years of experience at Northwestern Mutual. He has held numerous leadership roles at Northwestern Mutual, culminating in his current role as Assistant Director, Corporate Security, Crisis Management, and Business Continuity. Carl has responsibility for leading and overseeing the physical security, technology strategy, large project efforts, critical incident management, and travel security risk intelligence programs. In addition, he is a lead for enterprise-wide crisis response activities at his company. So let me start by laying a bit of the groundwork for today and what the conversation will look like. As I mentioned, with this program, we hope to continue the momentum of the December Judicial Security Forum, where we had discussed a number of specific instances of threats and violence impacting members of the judiciary. We discussed this trend and really thought it was important to actually dig deeper and identify all of the people and positions that are likely to be affected and the drivers behind this increase in threats and violence. So this is a practical program that we hope will provide you with some tips that will be useful in this conversation. And finally, knowing this, what responsibility and steps members of your community can be and should be taking for their personal protection, your staff, your family, whether at home, office, traveling, and in court. So Dan, as we look at the next slide, I'll share with the audience that you don't need me to read this whole slide to you, and I will not do that, but I really do want to share some information or highlight actually some topics on this slide because there are tens of thousands of individuals from judges to court officers to support staff to everyone's families in the federal and state and local court system that are being affected by security issues. For example, just in 2024, in 1 year, there were 822 threats against persons protected by the U.S. Marshals Service. And this is the federal system. We don't even know what the threats look like in the state or local courts. And as a matter of fact, earlier this month, I had the opportunity to lobby on Capitol Hill on behalf of both the American Bar Association and the Philadelphia Bar Association as Chancellor of the Bar Association in support of Congress creating an opportunity for a tracking program for state and local judges and others in state and local court systems so that we could gather this information and have access to it. Since 2021, the threats against federal judges have doubled. 54% of judges surveyed in 2024 say that public, physical, and verbal attacks on the judiciary has negatively affected their mental health. It's gone too far, and we are here today to talk about ways in which both the judiciary and all those involved in the judicial system can be protected. So Dan, over to you with this conversation.
Thank you, Kathy, and welcome to everyone, and thank you for allowing me to be here and spend some time with you today. I hope over the next 45 minutes or so, we accomplish about 3 things. So these are always bullets. One is that we describe and talk about the ongoing and emerging threat that we're seeing and make it real for you. One of the most challenging things that I have is getting very successful folks working in this industry to understand the threat and to personalize it instead of saying, that won't happen to me, that won't be my situation. The second is, I certainly hope that we'll leave you with practical recommendations for you to consider both personally and professionally around your own security and the ways that you can analyze the types of threats that exist and take them seriously. And last, I hope you'll continue this conversation. There's no more powerful body than getting together amongst your peers, as I'm quite sure you do very often, and having a conversation that focuses on these issues and challenges as opposed to just the latest case or maybe what's happening in the world or politically. So with that said, I'll say that, instances of judicial employees being assaulted and worse are all over the news. It's not just employees, but those close to them, family members. We look at Judge Sandra Fernstein or Joan Lefkoe or Esther Salas, who right now is still going through ongoing, I would call it traumatic and harassing behavior over the murder of her son. These are impactful things affecting powerful judges and lawyers throughout the country. But family members and bystanders are also included. And I think all of us not only are concerned about our own personal safety and security, but I know for me, there's nothing more important than the safety and security of my family. I travel 40 weeks out of the year. Most times I'm using good situational awareness for me because it's baked into who I am. But what I'm really worried about is what's happening back home while I'm away, what's happening with my daughter while she's at school, and what's happening with my wife when she's traveling for work. And I think many of you feel the same way. So there's some good news though, right? While for the first time, according to FBI statistics, with about 72% of our law enforcement agencies reporting, overall violent crime was down by about 10% and homicide 22% in the United States last year. This is certainly a good trend, but when you look at specific demographics, the U.S. Marshal Service data tells a little bit different story. As noted in my opening, and really Kathy did a great job, serious threats have doubled against federal judges and others in the judicial system, causing us to have great concern. The instances can have significant impact both financially, budgets for state and federal court security and other protective details. While they continue to grow, it may not be at the rate that is sustainable or fast enough to meet the threats, but also the morale and mental health. A couple of things I read, and a little bit outside of Philadelphia, but in the violence against Nevada legal profession, the Nevada State Bar had some really amazing comments from some attorneys and judges in result to their survey. And I thought I would quote a few of them for you, not to scare you, but to show the severity on a nationwide basis. Some of these quotes are death threats, stalking, letters, dead animals have been left on my doorstep. The opposing husband in a contested divorce hid near the courthouse with a rifle and scope waiting for me. I was the victim of an attempt to throw a grenade through the window of my residence. Those are things that are significantly alarming coming from members of the judiciary. And while most of us think we are protected, we have good protection inside the courtroom, sometimes inside our office building, we want to make sure we are focusing on the bigger picture. And in 2024, the NJC poll, 54% of judges stated physical and verbal threats affected their mental health. So think about that. You all know this profession. The folks that are doing this hard work that requires intense mind and inclusion every day are affected by worries outside the office about their physical health and protection. Certainly, it's impactful and doesn't make for great longevity. And there's no actual national or nationwide data on the exact number and types of attacks on these judges and lawyers, but only about half the states collect some form of information on the topic, which means that in many states, there's no tracking at all. We are guessing, we are using our connectivity and our networking to figure out what that looks like. So the numbers might be much worse than we think. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about some of the drivers that we see. And this is a apolitical conversation, of course, but I think when we look across the news media right now, some of the politicization of decisions that we see happening, it's not a surprise that we know the threat level is being increased. But there are some key things I think are important to think about for all of us. One is personal information. Kathy and I had the opportunity to speak as we were planning this session, and I said 5 years, 10 years. And of course, Kathy said, how about 20 years? When we look back 20 years ago, then 10 and 5, and look at the accelerator of how much personal information is available to the public by simply using Google, not a promotion of Google, by the way, it's pretty frightening. Whether we look at state property records, whether we look at social media, and if you don't have social media, that doesn't mean you're exempt, because likely someone you love or care about does. And they may be posting about the great birthday party or event that you went to recently, right? So those issues have made the access to your information immediately available. And in many cases, we do find that some of the victims are giving it away, again, through social media, even professional sites we consider to be safer, like LinkedIn, for example. I have 2,500 connections and my firm has 4,500, but I'm telling people in my own piece every Wednesday where I am. It's called Where Are We Wednesday, right? So it's a business development tool, but everyone knows what state I'm in. They know what city I'm in some cases, what client I'm with. So that's a risk that I take, but we often do that. And when we think those are safer, you also have your traditional Facebook and X and Instagram and other sites that folks are looking at, oftentimes with public profiles. And so for those reasons, we think it's really important to think about your privacy and oftentimes not be afraid to take proactive measures to make sure you're monitoring your own social media, your family's social media, and your work. Many times our employers, our firms are proud to boast what we're doing, what we're accomplishing, and I understand why. I think everyone here does as well, right? However, that can have significant impact on you too. Again, we're talking about something that's happened. We're talking about a case. We're talking about where you're going to be or what you're investing in or a political position that the firm is taking or your office is taking, and that can have impact. So those sorts of things are important. And of course, there's traditional drivers that we also know you must consider, right? Personal attacks due to the result of a case and verdict, the perception of representation, economic or domestic stress on our clients or victims or those associated with a case. And of course, We're dealing with access to weapons, addiction, mental health issues throughout the country, which of course lead them ourselves and to have to protect against sometimes a threat we can see and sometimes we can't. So here's one of those things I hope everyone takes away from the day. And that is thinking about your security at home, the office, commuting, in court, whatever that is to you. You know, there's a great saying, luck is not a plan and hope is not a strategy, right? Many times, people in positions of authority, as I mentioned, overlook the needs to prepare for every situation because we have confidence. It won't happen to me. I know how to handle myself and take care of it. The truth is the threat does exist everywhere you go. While you're at home, while you're commuting, while you're in the office, especially times when you might be alone or distracted, which create vulnerabilities and opportunities for those threat actors to take advantage of that vulnerability. And most of us don't think about it, right? It's getting on the train after work and heading home, and either I'm going to fall asleep because I had an exhausting day, or I'm going to put headphones in to drift away, or perhaps listen to the greatest legal podcast that's out there. But what does that do? It takes away from your senses, your situational awareness, what is happening around you, because we're used to it. That's how we travel and commute, particularly through large cities like Philadelphia, right? We're Philadelphia strong. So that case, we sometimes let our guard down. One of the things that I think you should really think about is having these plans. You should consider a personal plan for home, the office, your court when you're commuting. Know what you're going to do. If you're being targeted, it's very likely that your actions, whatever you're doing, and when you're in transit, when you come and go, the threat actors already know what that is, right? They've followed you. They know who you are. They know where you're going to be. So they have a lot of intelligence about you, and you don't really have a lot with them. So there's things you can do. You can work with human resources departments, leadership, local law enforcement, a security team, in some cases in the courts, the sheriff's department, the marshal service. They can conduct threat assessments, which my partner Carl is going to talk a little bit more about personal threat assessment today, about to help you with that, right? Understand the value, though, of techniques like verbal de-escalation and disengagement. I'm not going to say that attorneys might argue for a living, but we certainly don't want to do that when we're confronted on the street or in the subway or in a courtroom, right? We want to be able to lower the temperature. The point isn't to be right. The point is to be safe and move away from that situation. So that can be different from your day-to-day cadence and how you conduct your business, right? So the other thing you can do is develop a threat assessment procedure, some sort of communication channels amongst your family members. I knew for me, I've told my story. I'm just about to have my 1 millionth mile on a certain airline. And in those more than 1,100 flight segments, I text message my wife the exact same text message and emoji, which I won't share with you, every flight before we leave. And she texts me the exact same text and emoji every time I land and tell her I'm OTG on the ground. It is our way of knowing that we have arrived where we're supposed to be safely. There is no threat. There is no one posing a threat to us. And it's kind of a fun thing between husband and wife.
And how is that different than just saying I've landed or I'm taking off, or I'm just curious with the style?
Yeah, one of the ways is that if we were to do that, if something was wrong, I was in duress, my wife wouldn't know what the change was and why the change was there.
Got
So
it.
it's a way of me sending the same text every time. She knows not to ask me, well, that's weird. You sent something different today, like I've landed. So we established that baseline, much like a code word, if you will. It's just slightly clever, and I like to think younger and hip, right? So things that I think are really good. So with that, we're going to move on to identifying those potential threat actors, and I'm going to introduce Carl to the group.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Kathy, for the introduction, for the opportunity to be here. As Dan mentioned, I'm going to talk about identifying the potential threat actors as well as conducting those personal threat assessments to ensure your safety as you move to the office, from the office, and in your personal and work engagements throughout the day. So the potential threat actors could take on a variety of personas throughout your experience, right? They could be your current or former clients. They could be previous defendants. They could be current or former employees, activists, political opposition figures, organized crime figures, or they could be lone wolves. Unlike most bad actors or potential threat actors, they're probably not going to be very overt in their activities, so you're going to have to pick up on their subtle actions. These might take on the forms of things such as veiled threats, frivolous litigations, emotionally charged language, whether it be written or verbal, propaganda that's used to incite followers in support of a cause or an activity against you or others or your firm, expressive outbursts during an employment separation proceedings, or anything else that raises your suspicion, attention, anything that seems out of the ordinary for how they're acting. Okay. Once that potential threat is identified, you need to identify where they fall in a risk level assessment. Okay. So you're going to need to bring and conduct an assessment using the matrix that you see on the screen here. Now, without an actionable threat, this is kind of the best case scenario that you have to identify and quantify the risk that they pose to you. So you're going to want to identify a proximity to you by looking and identifying where they live. Are they in the same city, state, area as you? Can they get to you quickly and easily? Do they have a criminal record? Focus specifically on pending charges and orders of protection issued against them. Do they have a concealed carry permit that's valid in the state that you have? And do they have any weapons that are registered to them? Do they have any mental health holds that have been held against them and they've been committed against their will and held for a period of time? Also, do they have any past association with or litigation against you or your firm that may be something that they are now holding against you and using as their reason to become a threat actor against you? Once you've identified the threat, you should monitor them for a period of about 5 years. All threats are to be deemed as credible. You never know what could balloon and what could take on a different level of importance. So I recommend an annual cadence of just checking on these 5 different points here to ensure that you remain abreast of the threat and all of these different points here: the proximity, the record, the concealed carry, the mental health, and the past association, to determine, again, the risk level that the threat actor poses to you. Okay?
So Carl, before you
Yeah.
move on, I think this is where it might be a little difficult, right? I think this is exactly what we need to do if we know of a threat, whether we are a judge, a lawyer, whether the lawyer knows that this is happening to their client. I guess what we wanted to share is really this threat assessment matrix are the things that we should be thinking about. It's not always easy though, right? We may not I personally would not know or have access to how to get this type of information. But I think that's the key is to, well, you tell me, what is the key if I don't know how to get this information?
Correct. So there's a couple different ways, and we'll get into that with the threat assessment piece.
Perfect.
But there are systems that you can purchase, and you can do, so there's a couple different ways. And when we get into the threat assessments, you'll be able to see those different things. There's partnerships with law enforcement where they can help research some of this information for you. There's system access that you can purchase where you can run background checks on these individuals and pull all this background information and supply this information for yourself.
Thank you. And
There's different, yeah.
I know we're getting there, but I think
Mhm.
as we hear these, right, as a member of the audience, I'm thinking, so thank you. Looking forward to
Yep.
the rest.
Okay. So under the personal threat assessment, so this goes hand in hand with the other piece that we had. in identifying the vulnerabilities, you have an online presence, which Dan spoke of earlier, and the need to delineate those two. I am a huge proponent of that, of delineating your public and personal online presence. Don't share photos or details of your private life online. This practice extends to all members of your immediate family for who digital acumen is not always top of mind. Okay, it's not always top of mind for us as adults, but if you have college-age children, younger children, spouses who like to share, if you like to share yourself, try to refrain from doing so as much as possible. Again, you don't want to give any additional ammunition to a potential threat actor than is already available out there. Okay. Again, hire and deploy third-party vendors that you can use to scrub traditional white page data from the web. So they can scrub your address, phone numbers, email, etc., leaving behind strictly just a very basic business profile. Your firm, your location, all your typical business information, and your professional profile information. Properly manage personal information that is made public. So for example, if you're eligible and you receive an award and your family is in a group photo with you when you receive that award, organizational releases for a promotion or a partnership containing personal details, have input, direct what is going to be shared in that, and try to control the amount of information shared. First names, try to limit as much of that information as possible to try to keep a handle on what is out there about your personal lives and about your family members as well, okay? Especially those on minor children. I'm also a strong advocate, and Dan mentioned this as well earlier, for residential security and surveillance monitoring. Each residence and principal that is to be secured is unique and therefore requires an independent assessment to determine the correct level and type of features that should be deployed to establish the right kind of perimeter. Key considerations are ages of household residents and access patterns. For example, if you have college-age kids with varying schedules, you probably want to make sure that you are securing the doors properly or setting up time schedules that account for their comings and goings at different hours of the days and night, versus somebody with younger children or no children or a different setup in home schedules. You want to look at proximity to neighboring homes and what might be picked up on surveillance cameras, motion detection. The system could be as simple or as elaborate as the user feels is warranted, and many could be done simply as do-it-yourself options, just simply by purchasing and installing yourself. Also, intelligence gathering is key to remaining on the leading edge of risk identification. So there's two different approaches that you can take in this instance. The first is where the investment is your time. So you can do open source data mining, and this gets back to Kathy's question earlier about the threat identification and the threat actors and how do you maintain that matrix for those threat actors. You can do open source data mining, local, state, national news sites, newspapers, other publications, online sources, blogs, social media. All those sources are available to you to mine, scrape, pull data from on those potential threat actors and any other threats that may be posing themselves to you. You can also establish those connections with local, state, federal law enforcement partners for informal, proactive information sharing, allowing you to remain ahead of the risk curve. The other option is paying to play. Again, you can purchase risk management platforms to proactively alert you to specified risk activity within a predefined radius from an identified asset, normally your residence, your office, a combination of both of those. It's passive. You just kind of put in the asset and then you get to reap the benefits of the activity coming to you and the information. It's limiting your investment and expertise needed to mine that information and the threat activity. Also, as I mentioned earlier, a background check provider gives you a quick assessment of potential threat to help you identify the risk level and to do that annual review that I spoke of earlier. Combining some sort of methodology of all the best practices referenced here, then minimizing and delineating your public and personal online presence, your home residential security systems, your intelligence gathering, combining all of those into a useful format will hopefully allow you to identify any potential risks in enough time to develop a plan to mitigate or avoid. And again, all threats should be taken with the utmost seriousness and should never be ignored. Dan, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Great. Thanks, Carl. I'm going to comment real quickly on where you were there. I think that process is so important for folks to understand. And in a webinar today, it's really hard to take all of that information in and say, great, what do I do with it? So I know that we do have the opportunity for questions and answers, and certainly Kathy will talk about this at the end. If you have them, please feel free to send them in. We probably won't get to them today, and you wouldn't want them so verbally, but we certainly will do our best to respond to everyone in writing if we can, particularly on those areas, because we do feel it's that valuable to you. So I've kind of pushed us forward a little bit, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this particular issue, but courtroom and office security. I think it's so important to understand the role of the sheriff's departments, as well as it refers to courtroom security. And this is both for our judges and our attorneys. Again, our public attorneys, those in private practice who are in and out of the courts each day. It's really important to have great coordination with the courthouse security and law enforcement professionals. And that is to say that many times we're walking in, but we're not really looking at or paying attention to what the security levels are. For example, we might think it's a slight inconvenience that we're going through a metal detector or soon to be AI weapons detection system, and we don't think much of it, right? We walk in, we take something out of our pocket, our phone, our keys, we put them here, we walk through, and we keep going. We wish we could still be on the cell phone while we're doing it, right? So we sort of don't notice those measures that are in place, but they're important for you to know, because when an event occurs, when an attack occurs inside the courthouse or inside your office, you're going to need to respond. And you want to do that in a way that says, I have enough muscle memory to know where people are. I know where I'm separated from defendants, for example, where the public access is to my building. If I have to run out of a courtroom or run out of a mediation room, where is the closest exit? And you might think, I'll look up at the red or green sign, depending on when it was installed, that says exit. Only that's meant for a fire. That may not be taking you where it's safe. That may be taking you out of the door, right? Maybe even leading you towards the threat. You don't know what you don't know. So pre-planning, whether you're in the office, you're in the court, is really important to do. There's lots of physical controls, electronic access control, which requires cards, mechanical keys, tensor beams. In some of our more modern security applications, you may walk through optical turnstiles, those sorts of things. Those devices are not just there for inconvenience. They are truly there to control the movement of people. And in many cases, if you understand how it's being controlled, you'll have a much better chance of being safe and getting out if there's an emergency. So it's really important to think about those things. If you park and drive rather than take public transportation, know the parking lot, the parking deck, the outdoor parking structure, know the proximity to your building, know where you'll go. If you're anything like me, when you approach your vehicle, you approach it from the passenger side, from the rear forward, and look in, right? Because if you watch movies too, you know that bad actors who get in your car are likely to be hiding down behind the driver's seat, which I could never do, by the way, but I certainly am not going to wait till I get in the car to figure that out. So all of you should know that these are very basic security measures, but we often overlook them, again, for multiple reasons. Our positions, it doesn't happen to me, it won't happen to me, and it's so easy to not take that half a second to do something that could protect you.
So Dan, say it one more time. On the walk towards the car on the passenger side.
Yeah, I walk towards the car on the passenger side from the rear forward so I can look in my back window, make sure there's no one or nothing in the back seat and then the front seat. And then I proceed to the front with my key. And I know none of us really have keys anymore. We have fobs, right? Those sorts of
You
things.
do it every time? Is
I
it
do it
just
every
part
time.
of your it's turned into part of your, I got it.
With
Thank
the
you.
exception of my own garage, which I feel pretty comfortable in. Outside of that, if I am parked publicly, I always approach the vehicle that way. Plus, if I'm with my wife, it makes it easier for me to open the door for her. So it works out that way. So those are things that are important, but the utmost importance is evacuation routes. How will I get out of the building? Again, not just thinking about fire, but change the scenario. I can't get out the way I normally go because there's a dynamic event. There's an active threat that's occurring. What is my secondary point of egress? What is my tertiary port of ingress? All of us know these things, but we walk by them every day. And trust me, as someone who was in a plane that was all set to crash, I can tell you the value of having built muscle memory from looking at the card and reading it all 1,500 times I've been on those flights, because I did exactly what that card told me to do. And I never once consciously thought about it. That's what we want for you. You're focused on your work already. You have enough things to focus on. But if you need to have muscle memory and recall, we want you to have it. So I'm going to move on from that. As I mentioned, I wasn't going to spend a lot of time on that. I wanted to talk about a couple of, let's say, nonviolent or less violent considerations that you should have and be thinking about. The first is doxing. A lot of us have heard of this. Doxing refers to taking someone's information basically and releasing it, right? It can cause humiliation, stalking, give identity theft, a lot of negative consequences to it. Doxing is just a fancy way of somebody saying, and PII is another thing, right? Personally identifiable information. Sounds fancy, but really it's your name and your information, your pedigree. Who are you? What's your family? Where do you live? Again, most of us can find this information out in 5 minutes. We can search public records for property searches, where you may live, go on social media, find out where your children go to school, where they just graduated from. I do it too, right? I hope there's nobody online right now Googling me trying to figure out all these answers, but I admit I do it as well. So these are all things that can happen. And it can cause you, though, a lot of stress, whether that is just emotional harm that you're dealing with, public embarrassment, financial loss, right? Lots of things. So there's lots of sources. I've listed some of them here. This comes directly from the Department of Homeland Security, this slide, right? And really looking at the way we get information out. And Carl talked a lot about it in the threat assessment process, understanding open source information. So really important to know what that is. Some ways to protect yourselves. I'll kind of go through them a little bit. These are just steps, and that this presentation is available. So of course, no one is hopefully in your office or car writing anything, but we've talked about it. Be careful about what you post yourself, whether it's photos, videos, even if it's temporary. Remove PII, all that important data about you from social media if you can. Some of you might want to leave your birthday. You like those kudos. Perhaps you don't need to leave the year. But again, if you've posted when you graduated high school or college, I can probably figure out the year as well, right? By the way, still the most common password. So people using their birth year, then their graduation year, then their son or daughter's birthday. So more things to think about. Look through your followers, reject requests. I know a lot of people want to be popular. We all like to have 100,000 LinkedIn followers. That would be great. But when you don't know folks, I'm not saying they're threat actors, but you really do need to look at their profile. That profile can be spoofed. That can be a bad actor. It can be a fake ID. And now they say, I want to LinkedIn request you. I want to follow where you are. And you've opened the door to that, right? So considerations that you want to have. Request to remove PII. You can do that through internet service providers. If you find bad information or information that is personally identifiable to you that threatens your safety, you can, albeit a difficult process. Thankfully, I'm talking to judges and lawyers today who can make that change or suggest it. It can be difficult, but you can get them to scrub that information. And Kathy, I don't know if you had a question there.
Really quick question. I personally haven't thought twice about the LinkedIn, right? Somebody requests, you think it's professional. Generally, I say yes. Now I do look at who else they know.
Mhm.
Do you at least trust that? Like if you go to I do go to the profile. I
Mhm.
don't look at it in depth, honestly, but I do look to see, do they know some of the same people? Do you trust that a little bit, or are you still weary?
I trust it a little bit. It's one of many factors. The reason why I don't completely trust it is one of the most common spoofing and hacks, particularly in Meta, is that when someone gets access to your account, they get access to your address, they will re-friend request you. So I will get a friend request, for example, from someone I'm pretty sure I'm friends with. I do have like 1,000 friends on Meta. Like pretty sure I'm friends with that person from high school. It's a duplicate spoofed account. So I'm still friends with them, but someone with the same name and profile picture is asking me for access again. Right. So it's one criteria I look at, but not the only one. But great question, right? Some other things: restrict location tracking on apps. If you don't know what that is, folks, if you have an iPhone, I do. I admit I'm not an Android person. I don't know how to do this, but I'm sure it's the same. Go in and check location and privacy settings and see what apps are using your location and what third party they report to. Right. So if you're letting the weatherbug.com or AP follow you around and track your location all the time, they may have second or third parties that they share information with, or they could be vulnerable to an attack. So now folks can follow you around. We saw this with celebrities, most notably Taylor Swift. I'm not saying whether I'm a Swiftie or not, where folks were revealing the tail number to her aircraft to track her movement where she was, right? A clear violation of her security. Right? So do those things, turn off privacy settings, and set up multi-factor or two-step authentication. Most of us know what this is. That is, I'm logging into this important site. And when I do, I also get a text message that says, is this you? Put the code in, right? A lot of us have done that, can save you a lot of time, energy, and money by simply doing that. So that's definitely something that I recommend. Moving on to swatting. I'm not going to play the video today. We don't have time. But, swatting is something that is of a serious concern. And in generally speaking, it's malicious acts. It's with intent involving false emergency calls to 911, to a local police department, if you will, often reporting severe but totally false types of crises at a location. Typically, it's going to be something that's violence, like an active shooter, bomb threats, hostage situations, even domestic situations, because we know the type of response that's going to elicit from law enforcement, right? So I say this is nonviolent, but the truth is we have seen violence occur as a result of swatting, a completely malicious call where officers are responding in hot mode, right? Where they have weapons drawn. Weapons can go off if they're not handled properly, where we don't know what's happening at a house. So we're pulling an entire family out onto the street at 2 o'clock in the morning, face down into the concrete in front of your neighbors to understand until we secure the scene and understand the situation. So they can turn violent, right? And this can happen to anyone. Individuals, our business leaders, government officials for sure, but faith-based folks around the country right now, even our federal facilities get those sorts of things. So I think it's really critical that we understand what that is. And like I said, it can lead to violence, but really embarrassment, the harassing feeling, your family is being pulled out during it. And it can also lead to reputational damage. And I would certainly tell you that many folks that I know who have experienced swatting over the past decade still suffer from what I would call significant post-traumatic stress disorder. It was a traumatic thing for them to go through, whether their family was there, whether they had to repair damage, it doesn't matter, right? Swatting happens and there's almost nothing that you can do about it. When I say that, what I mean is that how it works, right? Very much like doxing we talk about or phishing emails that you might receive, it relies on open source information, right? That folks get. Social engineering techniques, ways that people get details about you. So it's fake reports, calls, emails. Sometimes they have really high specific details, such as your name, address, your phone number. This is what they do. Oh, this person is a judge here in the court. This is where they go every day. It sounds like this is legit. They know you and they know something is happening, right? But there's some things that we look for. Things
Dan,
like,
Dan,
yes.
just so I understand, so swatting is, and so our audience understands, so it can be getting this information about you that's from open source, and then
Mhm.
having this fake call to the police to come to that either home, your office, if you're in the courthouse, and having something transpire there. Is that literally an example?
It is. And really in bullet 2 here in the signs of a swatting call,
Yes.
you'll see that most people don't know what an active shooter situation is or what the response should be, but they'll call 911 and say, oh, I hear a domestic argument next door at 123 Main Street. I think I hear gunshots, which they know is going to have a hot police response to that house. Or I'm at the law offices of insert, I'm not going to say a name right now, and there's an active shooter. They know the response that's going to pull, particularly if you look at a city like Philadelphia, you are going to have 100 uniformed armed people from 6 different agencies in under 2 minutes rushing that building, right? And that's going to cause chaos, panic, fear. And what it does when we talk about multi-location attacks is it pulls away from available resources within the city. So now what we have is we have all of our police, or many of them, understanding the courtroom, understanding the law office. We have hundreds of resources pulled off the street, leaving others vulnerable or just causing chaos, right? So it's really something that can be dangerous to you. And as I mentioned, this may be a little bit different than losing your personal information from doxing, for example, where you can suffer significant consequences the next day. Someone steals your identity, applies for a loan, even does now, which is growing concern across the country, is mortgage loans and obviously title fraud, which is people stealing your homes from you, which is pretty much as easy as signing up for a credit card. Right? That happens with something like doxing. Here, you're dealing with a potential large-scale event of law enforcement, first responders coming to a place, making a very dangerous situation. So it's something that we are really concerned about. Like I said, some swatters, they provide law enforcement with names and addresses, and that spreads resources. So if you look at some of the school systems that have had challenges over the years, a state like Vermont, which has 35 state troopers on providing the majority of law enforcement in the state at one time, had 32 swatting calls at schools in one day. New York City had 231. And each and every one needs to be investigated as it may be happening. So you can see the law enforcement resources and response were being pulled away, and the amount of trauma that was inflicted on students, teachers, and parents from those notifications is almost immeasurable. So not a violent response or incident, but one that was really bad. There are some things you can do if you are swatted or you think you are being swatted. This one sounds probably a lot easier than it is, but remain calm. Remember, law enforcement is absolutely responding to any serious emergency call. And if you're panicked or you start making sudden movements, as we all know, when you interact with police, particularly on a difficult call, they can interpret that as being hostile, right? They don't know the good actors from the bad actors. That can result in you being injured or potentially leading to some sort of shooting or discharge or other use of force that we certainly want to avoid. So authorities are going to respond. Better to be calm, use a friendly approach where you can, if you can. Again, I say this, I've never been pulled from my home at 2 o'clock in the morning with a bunch of folks with flashlights yelling at me. So I say remain calm to the best of your ability, using what works for you as your experience and your already great demeanor that you have, but really important. And that goes hand in hand, part and parcel with cooperation. I completely understand that in these sorts of situations, although you are likely to be agitated, a bit confused about what is happening and why it is happening, why is it happening to you, you need to cooperate with local law enforcement, right? If they need to search your house, search your office, possibly even temporarily handcuff you, follow their instructions, right? It's just like we tell all of our clients, it's like we tell all the people we work with every day, why didn't you follow the orders, the officer's direction, right? Well, we have to be good stewards of that and what we preach as well. So when we're working with law enforcement, when folks are responding, it's essential to us that we understand they're on our side. And once you explain what you think has happened, they'll help you accordingly. But I can tell you, as having been on that side of the ledger, if you will, for quite some time, when there is a lack of information, when there is not clarity on what the call is or who is involved in it, and you've probably seen this dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of times in your career, no matter what seat you're in, we recognize that there is going to be a moment where they have to make split decisions. And that is going to be often based on the only intelligence they know, the actions that you take when they get there, and frankly, sometimes the tone and the way we talk to them, right? So really important to do that. And lastly, things to do if you're swatted is report it. So in most states, swatting is taken very seriously, right? From the Department of Homeland Security, the FBI office, the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, swatting is a big deal throughout all sectors, including our public figures. So that is a great thing that we have put resources behind it. We're investigating it, its causes, and potentially how to stop it. But it is a credible waste of the emergency responders' time. It can result in the victims, of course, being seriously injured, as we discussed. And if you're the victim of swatting, it's really important that you file a report and press charges against the person who made the call. Of course, I understand that assumes we were able to identify the individual who made the call, and we have some good intelligence there to move forward with that. But if you are the victim of swatting, file a report, press those charges. Swatting can have really, really negative repercussions. And therefore, it's always advisable from us just to remain calm, be yourself in a situation, cooperate with law enforcement, follow up with that report, and take the recommendations of those who are ultimately there to help you. That's really what it is. It can be emotional and you can have a lot of stress involved. So as we approach the end of our formal program today, I mentioned that I wanted you to walk away with a few things today that I thought were really critical for all of us to do. And the ones I want to harp on, in addition to understanding the threat landscape, understanding the opportunities for you to identify personal threats, and ultimately how to use situational awareness as something that drives what you are. I want to go back to this idea of security at home in the office. If there's anything that I can ask everybody to take away from today, it is number one, everywhere you go, you need to apply situational awareness, right? That is, what do I see? What do I hear? What is happening around me? Try the best you can to limit distractions if you're in public. Again, that could ultimately be headphones on because you're listening to the great legal podcast that's on right now. It could be what you're looking at on your phone. I'm sure all of us have seen the folks that almost walk into you, or in fact do walk into you on the streets of Philadelphia because
And
they are on their phone.
maybe
You're
I've
one of them.
I might have walked into a pole once in a while. Dan, will you move to the next slide so that we
Yes, I can do that. And it really gets to our Q&A. And those things are important. But I think one of the things that we need to do is learn when we have those things, be good situational awareness. Identify risk factors for each one of you in your home, your office, where you are, and who might be the bad actor. Learn to de-escalate, right? Again, it's not time to win and argue. It's time to solve the problem. And if that is someone is irate, someone is being loud, someone is threatening you, we want to lower the temperature and create a climate that is much safer for us. The last is almost every office, and the court systems as well, have an active threat response protocol. I couldn't harp on which one would be here today because everyone uses something different, from national programs like Run, Hide, Fight to Avoid, Deny, Defend, to the civilian response to active shooter situations, Alice, and I could go on with so many there are. But the chances are there is one that either your office in particular or the court is using. Really important for you to know what that is, because while we plan on this larger scale threats, and most of us think about emergency management and all hazards planning, we generally know if a hurricane is coming. We generally have an idea when we're going to have an ice storm. What we don't know is when there's going to be an active threat in our building, an armed intruder, a hostage barricade situation. Those things we need to take immediate action, and you all want to be on the same page in that particular facility. Do I run here? Do I fight here? Do I get out of it and hide where I need to be? Know where those spots are. That will keep you safe, particularly in an emergency situation. So with that, I want to thank everyone for their time. We did our best to make sure you would be done by 5 p.m. on the East Coast today, and just give Kathy enough time to kind of close us out and give you all good measures for today. So thank you so much on behalf of both Carl and I for allowing us to be here with you. And please stay safe.
Dan and Carl, really, really grateful for you both sharing your expertise in the area of security. We were hopeful that we could delve deep into the topic of security and really actually provide things like the details of what you can do, what you can think about both for your physical security and these concepts of doxing and swatting. I had never even heard of before, as you know, Dan, before we were preparing for this program. So I just think it's really helpful to think about tips and tricks. Honestly, I'm not going to forget the going to the car on the passenger side. I never once would have thought about going to the passenger side of a car as opposed to approaching my car from the driver's side if I'm driving. And so with that said, we were hopeful that we could provide those tips for you. I did want Dan to put up this slide because our two speakers today have graciously offered that if you have a question that we haven't answered, if you have a topic that you'd like to learn more about and what we can do for you here at the Philadelphia Bar Association to continue the conversation around security, from judicial security to the security of lawyers and all of the family, clients, witnesses, victims, everyone in between, how we can support that continued conversation. They have offered up for you to contact them. So here is their contact information. For me, as Chancellor of the Philadelphia Bar Association, it is really a privilege to make this topic a Chancellor's Forum. And so, Dan, I want to thank you and Carl again for the time you took to give us some tips here as we think about security and keeping ourselves, our families, and all of those around us safe. Wishing everyone a wonderful evening. Enjoyed this incredible weather here in Philadelphia, and we look forward to seeing you at our next Chancellor's Forum. Thank you.